It was Thursday, May 19th, 2:15 p.m., the hottest day yet. The invigilator had warned us. No talking, no bathroom, no mercy. The exam room was the assembly hall reconfigured, rows of single desks with their wobbly legs capped in tennis balls to protect the floor. Ceiling fans chopped the air into slow layers. The smell of ink and fear was strong enough to taste. Outside, heat rose like a soundless siren. We were told to sit according to the list taped by the door. I found my name, seat 43. I walked the lanes, counting, and stopped. There was a desk beyond the last row against the back wall. It had no number card. A bottle of water sat there, sweating. A pencil lay diagonally across the blotter. No one else noticed. Why would they? Panic aligned everything in their eyes. I noticed because I always notice the one thing wrong. It's a curse or a trick I do to feel control. I raised my hand. The invigilator, a severe man with a mustache like a ruler, came over. "Yes," he said. "There's an extra desk," I whispered. He glanced. "Ignore it, but sit." He stamped my paper. The stamp bled a little, seeping into the date, turning the 9 into something between 9 and 8. We began. The hall filled with the dry skitter of pens. Half an hour in, the door at the far side creaked open a fraction. A draft reached my ankle. It felt like a cat brushing past. Papers fluttered in a ripple. The invigilator looked up, frowned, and resumed his slow walk along the aisles. I thought of the extra desk. It sat patient, water bottle making a halo on the blotter. 40 minutes in, I heard a chair leg scrape softly. Not from the main block of desks, from the back wall. I didn't look. I told myself it was the invigilator adjusting a chair. 50 minutes in, a page flipped near my right ear, though no one sat at the desk beside me. My scalp tightened. Sweat ran down my neck to the collarbone and made a brief, cold track. I finally glanced back. There was a girl at the extra desk. She was small and bony, her uniform too big, wrists showing like chalk marks. Her hair was tied in 2 uneven plaits. She held her pencil like it was heavy. As I looked, she lifted her eyes to mine, not hostile, not pleading, just there, as if to say, "See?" Then she lowered them again and wrote. I looked at the invigilator. He was near the front, talking to the other invigilator about a missing stapler. I raised my hand. The girl at the back wrote, erased, wrote. When the invigilator reached me, I said, "Sir, someone is at the extra desk." He didn't even turn. "Focus," he said. I tried. My hand shook. The question about vectors looked like a road map. The fans hummed. The water bottle on the extra desk slid half an inch from condensation and made a soft click against the blotter. The girl startled and smiled at it like it had told her a joke. The sight made tears gather under my eyelids with a speed that embarrassed me. I blinked them away. A boy 2 rows up raised his hand for extra paper. The invigilator brought it, then looked toward the back wall at last. He stared for a long time. His face didn't change. He walked to the extra desk slowly and stopped a few feet short. He didn't speak. He looked, then looked down at the floor, then looked again. He turned and walked to the door and stood there with his back to the room for a full minute, breathing as if he'd run. When he returned, he pretended not to see anything. That was worse than if he'd shouted. When time was called, pens dropped in a wave. We were told to remain seated while papers were collected. The extra desk remained occupied. The girl caped her hands over the page like she'd learned to shield answers from cheaters. The invigilator collected our papers, avoiding her desk. As he passed me, he said under his breath, "Do not look back. Do not speak to her." He didn't sound strict. He sounded like a child. I didn't obey. When the stack reached the front and the second invigilator began counting, I turned. The girl looked up again, and this time her eyes held mine with a seriousness so complete it felt like a weight. She touched the corner of her paper and tapped 3 times. I don't know why I did it, but I tapped the corner of my desk in answer. 3 small sounds lost in a bigger noise. We were dismissed row by row. The extra desk remained. Students shuffled out, chattering now that the air had permission. At the door, the invigilator stopped me with one hand. "You saw?" he said, barely moving his lips. I nodded. "Don't mention it," he said, "to anyone." His hand trembled on my sleeve. The other invigilator called, "Sir?" sharply, and he let me go. In the corridor, the heat wall hit us. My friends joked about the vector question. I couldn't join. I went to the washroom, splashed water on my face, and stared at my reflection until it looked like someone else. When I stepped back into the hall, I heard the faint scrape of a chair again. I looked toward the assembly hall. The door stood open. Inside, the extra desk was empty. The water bottle was gone. Where the bottle had sweat on the blotter, a ring remained. The shape in the paper looked like an eclipse. I went home and slept badly. Dreams of tapping 3 times, of papers that wouldn't staple, of hands that hovered above answers and never lowered. The next day's exam was biology. Same hall, different seats. I found my number this time closer to the back. The extra desk was there again against the wall. The ring on the blotter had dried. The bottle had returned, half empty. The girl came half an hour in, as before, without opening the door. 1 second empty desk. The next occupied. Her pencil scratched a steady rhythm. I watched the invigilator. He never looked that way, but his jaw tightened every time papers rustled from the back dot at dismissal. Instead of filing out, I walked slowly to the extra desk. My body felt like it was doing something against permission, like stepping into a shrine without removing shoes. The air there was cooler, if that makes sense, a small draft in a sealed hall. The girl lifted her head. She had the sort of face you wouldn't remember except for the eyes. Her paper held questions from an exam we weren't taking. I recognized none of them. The date at the top was smeared into a stripe. She tapped 3 times again, soft like asking. I tapped back. "What do you need?" I whispered. She tilted her head toward the front. The invigilator was collecting papers. "Time," she whispered, finally. "I need it to finish." "How much?" I asked. Her mouth shaped, until it stops ringing. The bell rang, then not loud, just the usual end-of-exam clang. She flinched, pressed her lips together, and put her pencil down with care, as though returning a borrowed thing. She stood, and in that fraction of a movement, she left a shadow on the wall that didn't shift. Then she was gone. The shadow remained a second longer than it should have, then followed. For the rest of the term, the extra desk appeared at the back of every exam. Some days the bottle was full, some days empty. Some days I sat near enough to hear the small sigh when the bell ended time. The invigilator never counted that paper. We never saw her turn it in, never saw it on the stack. But the air near that desk had the feeling of being used warm, a smudge, a ring of water. On the final exam, power cut out and the fan stilled. Silence became thick. In that muffled quiet, before the emergency generator kicked in, I heard a pencil roll across a desk, then drop and spin to a stop. I didn't turn. I already knew what I would see. A hand reaching, a face not pleading but set on finishing, a tapping that asked for just a little more. The generator coughed to life. The fans resumed, stretching the silence thin. The bell, when it finally rang, seemed to linger 3 heartbeats longer, as if someone were holding it in place with both hands, making time long enough for one last answer. I don't know if she finished. I don't know if anyone ever does. But in every room where they arranged the tennis ball-footed desks in tidy rows, There will be one more desk than names on the sheet. If you see it, don't sit there. If you hear 3 taps, don't answer unless you can stand the echo following you home. Tapping when you wash your face, tapping when you switch off the light. Because once you've noticed the desk kept for someone who is late, time starts to sound like a bell you can't quite stop, which is to say, like school, which is to say, like the part of your life that teaches you how to wait for endings that don't end.